today. I am your host, Attorney Genghis Shakhan. I am the managing partner at Shakhan Wilkerson Law Firm. We are a boutique law firm, consists of myself as well as my partner, the famous attorney Chelsea Wilkerson. We are a dynamic duo. We are a boutique law firm, two attorneys, and we have a great and wonderful staff of legal team members, including a case manager and legal assistant, executive assistant, paralegal, etc., as well as receptionist, receptionist team that help us essentially do our jobs and provide services, legal services for all our wonderful clients and our soon-to-be wonderful clients that are out there in the on YouTube here. So thank you for joining us. We have a great video for you today. We are going to be discussing uncontested divorces and whether or not you need an attorney. Okay, it's a big question. We get a lot of times. We get calls and folks are saying, "Hey, we agree on all of the terms of our divorce. We want to know if we need an attorney, and if we can move forward without one, or if we can just, hire you guys to, draft all the the contract settlement agreement and maybe negotiate." And we'll want to discuss that today, whether or not that is going to be in your best interest. And we'll weigh the pros and cons of moving forward with an attorney and moving forward without one if your matter is in fact uncontested. Okay. All right. Well, before we get started, just a quick disclaimer. This is for educational and informational purposes only, guys. By watching this video, it does not create an attorney-client relationship between you and the law firm of Shakhan and Wilkerson, nor between you and myself. This information is not intended to be legal advice. In fact, if you do need a consultation, if you're looking to retain an attorney, someone from our office, I would highly recommend giving us a call and setting up a consultation. We have a couple numbers for you to reach out to us at. One is 478-845-1213. The other is going to be 404-999-9529. Or if you don't feel like getting on the horn just yet, you can hit the link in our bio and you can contact us that way. And one of our experts will be more than happy to get your contact information, find out some details, and we will get right back to you. Okay. So that option is available to you. And also, we definitely would invite you to enjoy all the immense resources that we have here on YouTube. Take a look at our channel. We cover a lot of the three legal areas that we actually practice. One is going to be family law, divorce, child custody, legitimation, child support modification, child custody modification, contempt, along with criminal defense, as well as personal injury. You can always hop on our website, hit that link in our bio, it'll take you over there. You may have to navigate back to the main page, but if you do so, you'll find a lot of well thought out, well written blogs that cover a lot of these topics if you want to read up on them and do a little research as well. We also offer some resources, materials, reading materials. They are available for purchase on Amazon. And I think you can find those if you hit the link in our bio. You can also take a look at what those two books are. Pretty good books. They focus more on the domestic relations cases, okay? Divorce, custody, child support, okay? So definitely take a look at those resources as well. Really quickly about our law firm. I mentioned we're a boutique law firm. We pride ourselves on being small. We handle small batch cases, and that gives us an opportunity to really get to know our clients and get to know their cases. So that is one reason why many of our clients do come ringing, is because one, we put a lot of effort into really producing a superior work product. We are compassionate advocates. We understand the bind that many of our clients are in. We want to resolve their legal issues. And so they are very happy. Many of our clients are very happy with what we do in terms of really advancing their legal interests. And so we'd invite you to go ahead and schedule your consultation and see what the difference is as you're calling around and vetting attorneys. Okay. All right. All of that out the way, little housekeeping. Let's go ahead and jump right into today's topic, which again is a good one. uncontested divorce. Do you need an attorney? As you already know, guys, if you've watched some of our videos, and if this is not your first time with us, we try to keep it real. We shoot straight from the hip. We always, even in our consultations, if we can help you, we'll let you know, we can assist you. If we can't, then we'll try to point you in the right direction. Okay. We can't provide any legal advice to non-clients. However, if there's, for example, a law firm that might be a better fit for you, we will say, hey, we're going to refer you over to, across town. We've done business with them, or we've been up against them, and how they do things might be a better fit for you. Or sometimes if you do the cost benefit analysis, certain price points might be too high for you, right? And so if that's the situation, if you're looking for, if cost and value is something that you're looking for, as opposed to, again, the work product and quality, which is, that's who we are. That's what we represent. We believe in quality and a superior work product. Okay. And so we understand that our price point does not, open the floodgates for everyone. Okay. That is not our intention. That is not our goal. We understand the value of the service that we provide. Okay. And so if a client appreciates that, then it might be a good fit. So, as you are calling around and vetting law firms, that road is a two-way road, a two-way street, right? So the attorney, the law firm is also vetting you to see if your case, if you are a good fit for them, okay? And so we like to believe that everyone that we move forward with was a great fit. But like any great relationships, sometimes things work out, and some instances they don't, right? But we're happy to say in many of our cases, things do work out. All right. So uncontested divorces. Do you need an attorney? So many times we will get a call, maybe from a spouse, and as I mentioned earlier, the spouse will say, "Hey, we have a divorce. We agree pretty much on everything. Nobody wants to fight. I don't think we need an attorney." Okay. And that's an absolutely fair question. And so there are a few things that you want to contemplate and think about as you are, really, really deliberating on what your next steps are going to be. Because Georgia does allow for the parties to pro se to file for divorce. In many instances, I want you to understand these forms are available. All right. And so I don't know if, sometimes the superior courts, they're inundated with a bunch of other stuff they have going on in terms of, administratively. So I don't know if the word is out there that many superior courts or Georgia courts do offer forms to pro se litigants, at least in domestic relations, when it comes to divorce, a divorce with children, divorce without children, along with some very simple and basic instructions on how to move forward. That, again, that is not coming from Shakhan Wilkerson Law Firm. I'm just letting you know what is out there for you in terms of resources. Okay. So you don't have to, call every local law firm and say, hey, try to piece together information on how you need to move forward pro se in order to file for divorce. A lot of the Georgia courts have done some of that heavy lifting for you. So I do want to make you aware of that. And, a lot of this information is at your fingertips. Okay. If you do a quick Google search, you might find information that is going to be super helpful in terms of the forms, right? That, you might need to, you and your spouse complete in order to begin to move forward with the divorce. There are also other agencies and companies that are out there. And again, I'm not endorsing them, that will, help and assist with, getting some of that information down for you on forms that might not be similar to what you would find in sometimes the superior courts. Okay. And again, that's going to be you and Google. You need to set up a time for you and Google to sit down and, find and research those things. And, I'm sure that, there are a plethora of them online, and it's just a matter of, whether the price point works for you, and, whether or not those documents are going to essentially going to serve the purpose that you hope that they will. Again, it's not something that I've researched. It's not something that I've looked at, but and so that's not an endorsement of any of these companies as well. I have to be, if you're listening closely, this, I'm weighing my words, right? Because it is not an endorsement. I do not advise it. And of course, but it is something that's out there as a potential option. You can move forward yourself, okay? But I always caution folks, I can also build my house myself, all right? I can work on my car myself, okay? I can probably operate or mutilate myself, considering I don't know anything about, the medical profession. It doesn't mean that it's wise, and it might be quite ill advised, okay? So just something to really think about, especially, when we'll move a little bit when we talk a little bit more about some of when it might be in your best interest to retain counsel, okay? And I'll let you know when I believe, it's in your best interest to think about hiring an attorney to assist you with your divorce, okay? All right, so I mentioned that you can absolutely move forward without a lawyer, so I don't want you to believe that, you have to have a lawyer to file for divorce. That's simply not true, all right? All right, really quickly, I didn't tell you our mission. I do want to share that with you at Shakhan Wilkerson Law. You may ask and question, like, hey, well, what is the benefit that the law firm gets in really putting out videos that are informational and educational and just for public consumption? Well, part of our mission, all right, is to educate and empower and protect Georgia families, okay? And that's really important to us. And that's one of the reasons, again, why there's so much, we feel like, goodwill surrounding our law firm, because, not only, are we putting out good karma and good energy into our community, it's one of the reasons why Chelsea and I elected to go to law school. We want to help people, okay, ultimately. Now, you have to, as a business owner, your business model can't be to, be and work pro bono cases all of the time, right? However, this is our way of paying it forward and giving back to our community in a what we feel like is a meaningful way. We understand that this is information that a lot of our clients and non-clients might be interested in, and so we want to make sure that, whether you decide to elect to go forward with our law firm or not, that you at least can be a knowledgeable and well-informed consumer when you are talking to law firms and vetting other attorneys, okay? We, of course, always would hope to, work with you and move forward, and really making sure that your legal goals are met. But we recognize that sometimes that's just not possible for a variety of reasons, okay? So compassionate counsel is what we provide, along with strategic advocacy. That's part of our mission, okay? All right, now jumping right back to the topic at hand, uncontested divorce. What exactly is that? So I'm glad that you asked, guys. So it generally means that you and your spouse agree on everything. And I like to say 100% of things. I don't know, attorneys might feel a little differently. There used to be a gospel song, I think it was 99 and a half. Some people may feel that way. I believe it needs to be, it's 100% or it is uncontested. It's that simple. Any kind of a disagreement makes it contested. So depending on your circumstances, that will probably include division of property. It's going to include the division of debts, whether or not one party wants alimony, one party does not want to pay alimony, child custody, parenting time, child support, things like health insurance, uninsured medical costs and expenses, retirement accounts. If there's a marital home, who's going to keep it? Maybe if somebody wants it, and who's going to vacate. Maybe both parties are okay with selling. What's going to happen with the equity, right? After the proceeds take care of all of the debt, right? Or maybe, the debt is not going to get taken care of. Maybe one party is going to assume all of that debt, okay? Or, what happens with vehicles, what happens with property. All of that stuff needs to be decided, okay? And if you have not come to terms on all of that stuff, then you cannot say that you have an uncontested divorce. All right. And so, as far as I'm concerned, okay. So it's a very important that, if you believe that you might have an uncontested divorce, that you and your spouse have that come to Jesus meeting, if you will, and talk about all of the stuff. Okay. And make sure that you are in 100% agreement. Again, if you're not in agreement, then you do not have an uncontested divorce, okay? Now, I've already answered the question of whether or not you need to hire an attorney if you have an uncontested divorce. And the answer is no, you do not. And so you are permitted to move forward pro se and without counsel. But the real question is not whether or not you are permitted to do so. The real question is whether or not it's advisable to do so. In some instances, guys, it might be, right? In other instances, that might not be the case. And so we're gonna delve into when it's a good idea and when it might not be such a good idea. Okay, when handling it yourself might make more sense is when maybe you've been married for a relatively short period of time. You guys don't have any minor children, so there's not going to be any child support. No need to do the child support worksheets or work on a parenting plan. Maybe there's no marital property, okay? You guys might have had an apartment, the lease is up. You're electing to go your separate ways. Neither spouse wants alimony. There's no retirement to divide. Maybe no one had retirement or had a pension. There's no businesses. There's no significant debt was accrued during that time period. And then both of you just kind of agree, hey, the ride is over, okay? And in that situation, it absolutely makes sense maybe for you to think about moving forward without an attorney, right? Again, you have to do the cost benefit analysis, right? And so, paying that retainer, paying if it's billable hour or a flat fee, you might pay for convenience. Some people pay for convenience, and I certainly understand that, because it's sometimes better for an attorney to do all the heavy lifting. Listen, I can cut my own grass. I have all the equipment to get out there and do it. It is convenient for me to hire a landscaper, okay? And so it's the same with, maybe going forward with a divorce. It's just convenient to have an attorney that's drafting everything, doing the heavy lifting, filing everything. If there is an appearance that's required, they're going to stand up and they are going to advocate for you on your behalf. All right. So if that's your situation, then you may want to strongly think about bringing on an attorney. Okay. So that is for folks, if you are propertyless, childless, have not been married very long, there is no debt, just a review, you might want to think about, going forward pro se. And so here are some of the biggest dangers, though. And again, I'm not advising you to go pro se. I'm just saying that, I understand those situations as opposed to others where people are really contemplating moving forward without counsel. So the biggest danger, though, now understand, because there still are dangers in doing so, okay, going forward pro se, whether or not you believe or are under the impression that your spouse doesn't have anything, right? And folks will tell me, oh, that bum, he does he doesn't own two nickels or two pennies to rub together, right? And sometimes people are shocked and surprised at the conclusion of the divorce, what their spouses actually or ex-spouses actually own. So the dangers is what I'm kind of getting into right now. And so this is usually where the problems kind of begin, right? Is that you and your spouse don't really completely disagree on all of the terms. We get those calls a lot. Yeah, my divorce is uncontested. And people will say it because, there is an understanding that an uncontested divorce is usually going to be cheaper than a contested divorce, right? And so it's like, yeah, we this is uncontested. We just don't agree on child support. Okay. All right, you're not uncontested then, right? You guys are going to have to fight that out, battle that out in front of a judge. Okay, means it's contested. Okay, or you agree to things. You could agree to things that are not necessarily legal or appropriate. Okay, so someone may say things like, "Hey, she can keep the house and I'll keep my retirement," but if, let's say, whose name is on the deed, whose name is on the mortgage, okay? And so what happens if, and I'm saying he and she, and so what happens if the husband and the wife, we'll use those pronouns, are the wife is remaining in the house, the husband is gone, and the wife falls behind on the mortgage, but the husband's name, you guys have gotten a divorce, the husband's name is still on the deed, or husband's name is still on the mortgage, right? That's going to impact your credit, okay? And that's something that you should have addressed in the divorce. And it's something that you did not. It's something that's going to bring you back to court. And when you come back to court, more than likely, you're going to have to come back with an attorney. And it's probably going to be much more expensive this second go round than it was if you had just got an attorney the first time, okay? And so these are some of the issues, regarding financially appropriate terms that you would have to get addressed if you decide to move forward pro se. And again, you own property together, okay? Or like, let's just talk about retirement, okay? Maybe there's retirement that needs to be divided, and you guys come to, what's called a gentleman's agreement, okay, regarding the retirement or the marital property. A lot of times, what you may or may not understand, especially with retirement, it may require a separate order, a quadro, qualified domestic relations order, right? Those are highly technical documents that need to be drafted and approved by the administrator of the retirement, as well as the judge and the court, and they need to be accurate, okay? And so if you don't know how to draft a quadro, if you don't know the timeliness of trying to get that quadro through prior to the final divorce decree, then you're going to probably have a problem, okay? And there might be an issue with you gaining access, to the retirement funds that you might have been entitled to, or there might be some kind of tax implications because you didn't do it correctly in the first place, okay? And so this is the things that you need to think about as you are considering whether or not you want to move forward pro se, and if you have property and you guys agree on all the terms, or whether maybe you can bring an attorney on for a consultation or a limited scope in they handling just division of the estate, or maybe just to draft documents, those type of things. All of that is something you do want to strongly consider. Another thing that we see many times is one spouse might not be in a financial position to actually refinance the house to refinance the car into their name, okay? Sometimes called a divorce refinance, okay? And so that can be problematic as well because, again, you might leave the divorce, in an amicable fashion on good terms. But what happens in 2 years if you're not on good terms and the house that was supposed to be refinanced and put into your ex-spouse's name has not been refinanced and you're looking to purchase a new home, but you can't because you have a mortgage on your old one that was supposed to be refinanced out of your name, okay? But that person might not be in position to actually do so. So again, you might find yourself back in court or having to draft, some type of contempt action or even a new petition to address things that should have been addressed during the initial divorce. Okay. However, this is where, sometimes people try to save a few pennies and they end up, essentially, expending an arm and a leg trying to get things addressed because they did not do things right the first go round. Okay. So something to think really long and hard about. The other part is having children. Okay. If you have children, you strongly may want to think, and you guys do not agree on what custody is going to look like, what support's going to look like. Again, you want to think about the possibility of bringing on some form of representation. So in these types of cases where the parties are seeking an uncontested divorce, where they have minor children, there are parenting plans that have to be completed. There are child support worksheets that have to be completed. More importantly, that child support number is not something that you pull simply out of thin air. You don't say, hey, you know what? $500 a month sounds pretty good for support. Why don't you just pay me $500 or vice versa? Okay. So you are potentially in this situation when it comes to deciding what's going on with the minor children. If you are pro se, deciding things like legal custody, physical custody, parenting time, holidays, summer vacation, transportation, this final decision-making authority, child support, health insurance, daycare, even, again, we talked a little bit about uninsured medical expenses, okay? And so if you make bad decisions about this stuff can impact your rights for years, okay? And so we see people, many times people who are, fighting about custody, whether it's legal or whether it's physical or both, child support, they find themselves in court every few years battling it out over the same topics, okay? And so this is one of the reasons why, if you have children, if you are not in agreement, if you guys are not on the same sheet of music, you do, again, strongly want to think about bringing on counsel so that you can kind of get, the terms and details ironed out in the courtroom, all right? The bad parenting plan is going to create a lot of conflict. A vague parenting plan is going to create a lot of conflict. People will be a little confused about when visitation starts and begins, who's doing pickups, who has the children for the summer, what are those dates look like, who has, the first right of refusal, okay? What happens when you begin dating, have a new romantic partner, and you have adults in the house and you have the children staying overnight? Are adults allowed and permitted to stay overnight when you have the children during your visitation, okay? Thanksgiving pops up, Christmas pops up. Who has the children on Thanksgiving Day, on Christmas Day, okay? These are, it sounds small today. However, these are very real issues that our clients that come to see us grapple with. And I know that many of you who are parents, and you are co-parenting, grapple with as well. Things like having access to school records, access to medical records, who is making extracurricular activity decisions, right? That's another video where we discuss, take a look at our previous videos on parenting plans. So this is as you can see, it sounds like it's not a lot, but it is a lot to contemplate. It is a lot to think about if you have minor kids. And so this is where having an attorney is going to be beneficial, because your counsel should be already up to speed on this stuff and should be addressing this stuff in real time, so you don't have to think about it or give it a lot of thought. Okay, they may ask you some questions about what you'd like to see happen in a parenting plan, but that should be all drafted up and put into that parenting plan as as the parents see fit, or as if it's going to be, if we're representing one party, as our client sees fit. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, child support not being just a number that's pulled out of thin air. The parties might agree to those terms, but there are other things that should be contemplated when it comes to child support. Who's covering the medical needs of the minor child, the dental needs, the vision, right? All of that stuff. There might be some other form of insurance. When you start talking about extracurricular activities, if the minor children are involved in some type of summer leagues, and if the minor children are in camps, okay, who's going to cover those types of things? If there are uninsured costs, medical costs, how is that going to be divvied up? So sometimes if the child support obligation is 60-40, maybe it's divvied up that way. A parent might have 30 days. One parent might have to produce the receipt. Another parent will have 30 days to reimburse that parent, right, for their cost, their portion. Okay, so all of that is usually contemplated and put inside the four corners of a settlement agreement or a parenting plan. Okay, and so that is, if you are unfamiliar with those things and you are pro se, that these are some of the dangers. That's what we're discussing right now. Some of the dangers of going forward pro se and not getting these things addressed. Okay, or trying to address them after the fact. And we see that a lot. We get a lot of calls after that final order is in, or worst case scenario, I've seen folks who have children, but to avoid doing the parenting plan and the child support worksheets, they will pretend that they don't have any children and go forward and get the uncontested divorce and leave the parenting plan and stuff unaddressed. Well, and that again, one, you shouldn't make misrepresentations to the court. However, if the parenting plan is unaddressed, what's visitation going to look like, right? Again, you might be amicable right now, but what happens when you get a new romantic partner and you guys want to take the kids to Disney World, okay? Or you want overnights. All of a sudden, which happens often, you see all this parental alienation and the kids become pawns in a much larger game, okay? And so something you want to absolutely think about. Retirement accounts can also be expensive to get wrong. I talked a little bit about quadros, qualified domestic relations orders. So when you start talking about 401s, if you're dealing with a member of the military, which, again, their divorces look different. Again, going pro se might be ill-advised, right? Government retirement, IRAs, all of that stuff that might need to be divvied up and divided. It's probably not in your best interest to move forward pro se. Okay, so it's not enough to say, especially in a military divorce, where there's retirement. Oh, hey, by the way, my wife gets half, and let's be done with it. Okay, if the male is the service member and the female is maybe a stay-at-home wife. Okay, in that scenario. Okay, so something you do want to think about bringing counsel on to advise you or to help with the very technical aspects of. And I just used the example of a military divorce, but we talked a little bit about quadros earlier, which is again highly technical. Okay, the marital home can also create problems after a divorce. We hear things like, "Oh, I'm going to let my spouse keep the house," and that's fine However, your name might be on that deed. Your name might be on that mortgage. And so that will probably need to be addressed in the divorce. The judge is not going to be your permanent referee, right? And what I mean by that is your divorce comes before the court, and it should come before the court one time in terms of, having a divorce complaint and getting it addressed, getting it adjudicated, and then, getting a final divorce decree. Now, you may come back on things like contempt, or you're trying to modify certain things. However, it's not the expectation that in 2 or 3 years you're popping back up because, you guys were supposed to, one party was supposed to take the house and they didn't refinance. All that's going to mean is, again, you're going to probably have to have an attorney. You're going to probably have to fight this stuff out, and it's going to cost you much more that second go round and be a bigger headache to you, because by then you might have wrecked your credit, right? And it's a little hard to, the bell is kind of rung. It's a little hard to unring it. And so you want to get this stuff addressed at the outset, as opposed to, waiting. Okay. If somebody needs to refinance, again, that's going to be in the paperwork. Who might be on the hook for repairs? Who might be on the hook for the taxes? That's stuff that needs to be addressed. We have clients with very real issues regarding those things. And so that's stuff that you do want to absolutely get addressed. Okay. What happens if the house has to be sold? Things like the timelines, what's going on with the proceeds. Sometimes, we'll even sit down and chat about who is going to be the realtor. Okay. How much time does the realtor have to make the house ready for sale? Those types of things, right? And doesn't, I know this seems like, kind of the minutia and the, really a lot of the details of a divorce that people are disinterested in, but your attorney is trying to protect you. At least that's what we do for our clients. So we think about all these things so you don't have to. That's what you hired us for, okay? All right, so let's move on to the debt. That's something that a lot of folks forget to really address, okay? They're so busy thinking about the assets, there's usually a lot of debt that has to be divided up. Credit card, personal loans, vehicle loans, mortgages, tax liabilities is another big one, right? And so medical debt and business debt. And so we see that debt. Sometimes marital couples will accumulate debt behind the back of their spouse, okay? And so going forward with an uncontested divorce uncontested divorce without counsel, that might leave things like that unaddressed, and you may be on the hook and liable for some of your spouse's debt because it was not addressed in the uncontested divorce as it should have been. All right. And then let's talk a little bit about the settlement agreement. I talked a bit about it earlier and how important that document is. And so if you're going through a divorce, and especially an uncontested divorce, a lot of times people think that paperwork is just kind of routine, cookie cutter paperwork, boilerplate paperwork. And many times what you have to understand is those documents are, that might be really involve your money, your property, as well as your children and your financial future. They may be some of the most important documents that you get signed in your lifetime. Okay. And so if you're doing all of that, the stakes are super high. You want to have an attorney there to essentially hold your hand through this process. Okay. It's the same with purchasing a house, right? There's usually an attorney involved. And so, because there are aspects of it that are technical. There's a lexicon that you might not be very familiar with, procedures that you're not familiar with. You don't want to get scammed. Okay. You don't want someone to have a superior title or superior rights, ownership rights to you. Okay. And so, it's one of the reasons why an attorney might be involved in, for example, the sale and purchase of a home. All right. And so there's something to think about, especially someone that is drafting all of those documents. You want to read everything before you sign, especially if your spouse has hired an attorney to take a look at things and put things together. Let's talk a little bit about that. Usually we'll get calls and say, "Hey, my spouse and their attorney has drafted everything. They've handled everything. They just told me to go ahead and sign." All right. You never want to sign anything without giving it a good once over. I would say you need to go over it multiple times. And another rule of thumb is if one party has an attorney, it's usually important for you to get an attorney as well. They thought it was important enough to get an attorney. You should do the same. And many times, what an attorney may or may not share with you that has been hired by your spouse is they do not represent your interest, okay? They represent your spouse's interest, all right? Your interests are diametrically opposed, okay? And so your spouse has their own interest, you have your own interest, hence a divorce, right? You are unwinding a contract, okay? Two parties are now separating, all right? Separating their estates, separating their lives. And so it's important that you bring on your own counsel so that they can do an independent read of whatever agreement was put together. All right. And so sometimes you don't need full representation for that. You just need, and we talked a bit earlier about a limited scope of representation. Okay. And so sometimes, you can find a law firm or attorneys that are willing to undertake that for you. All right. So depending on the circumstances, depending on your needs, depending on, the availability of the attorneys around you, you might just be hiring an attorney to review settlement documents, draft divorce documents, review a parenting plan, calculate child support, or just identifying potential problems in a settlement agreement. But there are advantages to doing it yourself. You already know what they are. One is it's going to be a lower cost, a lower price point, right? That is always the advantage of doing anything yourself. I've said to you, hey, I could be out there in my lawn cutting my grass. If I just want to take 3 hours on any given Saturday or Friday afternoon and go ahead and handle it. But the convenience of having a landscaper do it is too tempting. All right. I would rather do other things, and it probably makes more financial sense for me to spend time doing other things and things that are going to either help me relax or that are going to earn me more money. All right. So you want to always do a cost benefit analysis. Yes, the cost is going to be reduced. However, there might be other costs, okay, that you're going to have to pay on the back end of that. All right, and that's something you need to think about. Going forward, pro se gives you more personal control, right? It puts you in control of, really a lot of the terms, as opposed to going to court and having a judge or jury decide those things for you. All right, but just keep in mind that usually doing the pro se representation is great for situations. Again, haven't been married long, don't have a lot of property, no minor children, no assets, no real debt. There's no child support to factor in. There are no real financial issues. Okay. And so let's talk really quickly about the disadvantages. And I've covered most of them of doing it yourself. One is that you can miss out on important rights. Okay. One of the things that you don't get to partake in is the discovery process. Sending documents or subpoenaing witnesses, or exploring what your spouse's accounts might have looked like, right? Or if they had other assets. Okay, that is, you forego that process when you go ahead and enter into a settlement agreement. You also run the risk of documents. And doing the disadvantages, documents not being done correctly, all right, being done incorrectly. I've seen cases that have sat in court or have been dismissed simply because the parties they've entered, they've done the documents incorrectly. They're not filed appropriately. Okay, it can create issues for future litigation. We get a lot of calls. People have messed up their divorce. Or they've made some pretty bad decisions, and going forward without counsel, and now they need an attorney. Sometimes people are still in the middle of the divorces, and then sometimes we have people who call us after that the final divorce decree comes out, and they've realized, they've made a big blunder, and they have buyer's remorse. Don't be the buyer's remorse guys. So you might want to go ahead and hop on the attorney train early on, especially if all the criteria I've discussed, if you find that it's in your best interest to seek some form of legal representation. The other thing is you might not recognize an unfair deal. And so, that is one of the dangers of being unrepresented, especially if one side is represented. You just don't know what a bad deal actually looks like. And the court personnel, the judge, they can't be your attorney. Okay. So sometimes people will show up in court with the document, say, hey, judge, I don't understand what I'm doing. I don't understand what this means. I don't know what to enter into the parenting plan or the child support worksheets. And the court generally will not be able to help you out or assist you. That includes the judge as well as the good folks at the clerk of courts. Okay. So when you should strongly consider hiring an attorney, if you have minor children, you have a lot of equity in your home, retirement accounts, a pension, maybe business, if you have a lot of assets, if you have a lot of debt, if you're seeking alimony, if there are, maybe the parties have, there's been these great disparities in incomes. Maybe you're not as financially savvy as your partner is. There are military benefits that are on the table. All of these things, you have to protect your interests and protect your rights. And the best way to do that is going to be by bringing on counsel. Okay. So here are 5 questions I came up with that you need to probably ask yourself, and it'll help kind of steer you in a direction of whether or not bringing on an attorney is going to be beneficial for you. Do you completely understand everything you're signing? And if the answer is no, then you might need an attorney. Do you know what assets and debts out there exist? Okay, that's a biggie. Number 3, do you understand what rights you might be giving up? So usually that's simple. Most people do. If you have children, do y'all agree or disagree on what the parenting plan is going to look like? And the same is going to go for what child support is going to look like. If you don't, then y'all have a contested divorce anyway. Y'all don't have an uncontested divorce. Are you saving money simply to postpone an expensive problem? That's the number 5. And if your answer is yes, then you may want to work on putting some resources back so that you have a war chest and you can actually move forward with bringing on counsel to assist you with your divorce. All right. It's important that you bring on an attorney. Hopefully that, you don't want to, turn an uncontested divorce into a contested one. If you guys are really, really close on, again, most of the terms, and it can be settled or negotiated, then that's something that, should also be pursued. And so it's something that, of course, is always on the table for us as litigators. We're prepared to litigate. We're prepared to enter into a settlement agreement. A lot of it is determined by what our client wants. And of course, we'll always make sure that our client knows of the benefits as well as the disadvantages of doing either one of those things. Okay. And so really, really important you avoid unnecessary fighting. All right, guys, as a final takeaway, as we address, if you need to do that cost benefit analysis, ask yourself those 5 questions. If you don't recall what they are, just basically hit replay and listen to them. Do your own, as I mentioned, cost benefit analysis, weigh the pros and cons, and make a decision for yourself. If your matter is going to be uncontested, is it important that because you have kids or you have assets or debt that stuff get addressed? Okay. And if the answer is it is, then it's probably important enough for you to bring on counsel. All right, guys, as always, thank you for watching. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully this has been educational as well as informational for you if you are contemplating a divorce. If so, I'm sorry to hear it. However, we want you to be informed. We want you to understand all of your rights. We also want you to understand the advantages and disadvantages that you may face going forward pro se. Okay. As always, if we can assist, you can give us a call at 478-845-1213 or 404-999-9529, or you can hit the link in our bio and one of our experts will reach out to you. We look forward to seeing you next time, guys. If this has been good for you, please make sure you like, follow, forward the video along to any friends or family that might be going through a divorce as well. Thank you. I'll see you next time.